Every few seconds, your body changes in ways that do not look like a thought. The interval between two heartbeats shortens or lengthens by a fraction of a second. Your breath catches, deepens, or becomes slightly shallower. Muscles around the jaw, eyes, throat, abdomen, or shoulders adjust their tension before you have formed a clear sentence about what you feel. Ordinary intuition says emotion should begin as a private experience in the mind. Fear, calm, embarrassment, longing, relief. First the feeling appears, then the body reacts. But measurement shows a stranger order. The body often begins changing before the emotion has a name. If there were no deeper mechanism, this should not happen. A message on a screen should not alter breathing, blood flow, attention, posture, and readiness to move before the mind has fully interpreted it. Another person's tone of voice should not shift your own nervous system before the words are understood. A tense room should not feel different from an empty one if emotion were only a private sentence inside the skull. Without some hidden, regulatory process, the brain would remain sealed off above the neck, and the body would simply wait for instructions. Instead, emotion appears as a whole-body event. The brain, heart, lungs, muscles, hormones, memory, and social perception begin negotiating one question before consciousness finishes its explanation. What kind of world is this body in right now? That question is not philosophical at first. It is biological. The organism has to decide whether to conserve energy or spend it, whether to approach or withdraw, whether to speak or stay silent, whether to widen attention or narrow it to a possible threat. Emotion is one of the ways the body prepares perception and action at the same time. This is why feelings can be so convincing. They do not arrive as abstract opinions. They arrive with evidence from the body. A sudden worry is not only the sentence, something is wrong. It can be a tightening across the chest, a shorter breath, a sharpened ear for small sounds, a shift of blood pressure, a readiness in the legs, a tightening in the gut. A moment of trust is not only the idea, I am safe here. It may involve a longer exhale, softer facial muscles, a less defensive posture, a slower pattern of speech, and a wider awareness of the person nearby. These changes are not identical for everyone. And they are not perfect signatures of one emotion, but they are not random decoration either. They are part of regulation. The nervous system is constantly reading the inside of the body. It receives signals from the lungs, the heart, the digestive tract, the muscles, the skin, and the bloodstream. Most of these signals never become clear, conscious sensations. They arrive quietly, as background conditions, a little fatigue, a little pressure, a slight unease, a warm looseness in the face, a heaviness behind the eyes. From this internal traffic, the brain does not build only a map of organs. It builds the felt condition of being alive in a particular moment. The name for this inward sensing is interoception. It is less familiar than vision or hearing, but it is central to emotional life. Interoception tells the brain how fast the heart is beating, how the breath is moving, whether the stomach is tense, whether the body is overheated, whether muscles are braced, whether something inside feels stable or disturbed. It is not a single sense with one clean message. It is more like a low, continuous weather report from beneath the skin. And because that report is never neutral, emotion becomes difficult to separate from the body that carries it. A person may notice a racing heart and call it fear. The same racing heart before a performance may be called excitement. A tight stomach may become dread, hunger, shame, anticipation, or grief, depending on the situation and memory around it. The body provides evidence, but not always a label. The label is assembled. The brain asks, without using words, why is the body changing like this, and what should be done next? That small gap between bodily change and conscious meaning is one of the quietest thresholds in human biology. Something has already moved before the self has explained it. The shoulders rise before the thought becomes clear. The eyes search the room before the reason is known. The breath shortens. And only later does the mind say, I am nervous. In that delay, emotion is not yet an account. It is a regulatory pattern searching for a meaning. For a long time, The simplest account was that emotions live in the brain and the body obeys. It is a tempting picture because it gives emotion a command center. The brain judges the world, sends orders downward, and the rest of the organism carries them out. But the living body is not an obedient machine waiting below consciousness. It sends information upward constantly. It changes the brain's conditions from moment to moment. It affects what becomes noticeable, what feels important, what seems threatening, and what seems possible. The autonomic nervous system is one of the major pathways in this exchange. Its name can make it sound remote, as if it belongs to a separate automatic layer of life. But it regulates many of the processes that make a feeling feel bodily: heart rate, digestion, sweating, pupil size, blood vessel tone, breathing patterns, and the readiness of muscles. Its sympathetic branches help mobilize the body when action may be needed. Its parasympathetic branches help restore, settle, digest, and return the organism toward a wider range of perception. These systems are not simple opposites like gas and brake. They overlap, negotiate, and shift according to context. When an emotion arises, the body begins reallocating resources. More energy may be made available for movement. Attention may narrow around a possible threat. Sound may become sharper. Faces may be scanned more intensely. The digestive system may slow. The hands may become colder. The voice may change. If emotion did not do this kind of biological work, it would be strangely expensive. The body would burn energy, alter circulation, and tighten muscles for no reason. Evolution would have carried a costly theatre inside the organism. It makes more sense to see emotion as part of action preparation. This does not make emotion crude or mechanical, it makes it intimate. A feeling is not merely what you think about a situation. It is the body's way of placing that situation into a field of possible responses. Stay, leave, freeze, speak, hide, reach out, defend, wait, rest. The conscious feeling is only one layer of this decision. Beneath it, the body is already adjusting the conditions under which the next perception will occur. The heart sits at the center of this account, not because it is mystical, and not because old poetry was secretly doing cardiology. The heart is a muscular pump, but it is not a simple pump. It is electrical, chemical, mechanical, and deeply connected to the nervous system. Its rhythm changes with movement, breath, pain, stress, attention, temperature, posture, and social connection. Emotional states often leave measurable traces in the timing between beats. A healthy heart does not beat like a perfect metronome. That detail matters. To ordinary intuition, perfect regularity sounds like stability. A machine that keeps exact time seems precise and strong, but a living heart needs flexibility. It must speed and slow from one breath to the next, one movement to the next, one demand to the next. The small variations between heartbeats are called heart rate variability. They do not reveal a person's soul. They do not measure moral strength or emotional purity. But they can give a window into how flexibly the autonomic nervous system is adapting to the moment. During inhalation, the heart often speeds slightly. During exhalation, it often slows slightly. This respiratory rhythm is partly linked to the vagus nerve, a major pathway between the brain and several organs. The vagus is not a magic wire. It is a complex biological route carrying signals from the body to the brain and from the brain toward the body. Through it, breathing and cardiac rhythm become linked to regulation. A slow exhale can influence the timing of the heart. A disturbed breath can feed a different set of signals back to the brain. This is one reason anxiety can feel so physical. It is not simply a weak thought repeated too loudly. The body may be breathing faster, holding the chest more rigidly, increasing vigilance, tightening the abdomen, and preparing muscles for action. The brain then reads a body already arranged for defense. That feedback can become evidence that danger is real, even when the room itself has not changed. A loop forms. The brain predicts threat. The body prepares for threat. And the prepared body returns signals that make the prediction feel more convincing. calm is not the absence of activity, it is a different organisation of activity. When a person feels safe, grateful, connected, or quietly focused, the body does not shut down. It regulates differently. The exhale may lengthen, the face may soften, the voice may settle. Attention may widen enough to include more than the immediate problem. In some conditions, the rhythm of the heart becomes more orderly in relation to breathing. This kind of bodily organisation is sometimes described as coherence, but the word should be kept grounded. It is not a hidden energy field making reality obey emotion. It is a measurable pattern in which rhythms that were competing or fragmenting begin to work with less internal friction. The more careful picture is already powerful enough. Emotional state can alter the rhythmic organisation of the body. That altered organisation can change the information reaching the brain, and because the brain uses bodily information to interpret the world, the same room can feel different depending on the state of the organism entering it. A hallway at night is not physically transformed by anxiety. Its walls do not move, its air does not become heavier. But a body in defence may process the hallway as narrower, louder, more urgent, more filled with possible signals. A familiar voice heard after sleep deprivation may sound colder than it is. A neutral glance may be interpreted as rejection when the body is already carrying stress. Physiology does not merely decorate experience after the fact. It helps set the conditions under which experience is formed. The reversal is quiet. Emotion is not only a reaction to the world, it is also a way of preparing a world to be perceived. The brain is not a camera receiving raw reality and then adding feeling afterward. It is closer to a prediction organ. It is constantly estimating what is happening inside the body and outside it, comparing those estimates with incoming signals and adjusting when the mismatch becomes large enough. This broad idea is often called predictive processing. It does not mean the brain invents everything. It means perception is an active negotiation between expectation and evidence. Emotion fits naturally into this process. The brain predicts what the body needs. It predicts whether energy should be mobilized, whether threat is nearby, whether another person is safe, whether pain matters, whether the next moment requires speed or patience. The body answers with signals from heart, breath, muscles, organs, and hormones. The outside world answers with sights, sounds, faces, words, distances, and movements. The resulting feeling is not floating above the body. It is assembled within this loop. This explains why the same internal sensation can become different emotions in different contexts. A quickened pulse in a dark alley may become fear. The same quickened pulse before meeting someone beloved may become anticipation. A dry mouth during an argument may become shame or anger. The body gives the brain a state. The situation gives that state a possible meaning. Memory gives it a history. Language gives it a name. And the name matters. Once a feeling is named, the brain can work with it differently. Vague bodily agitation is often harder to regulate than a more precise recognition. Disappointment, embarrassment, hunger, grief, irritation, loneliness, overstimulation. Naming does not magically erase the body, but it can reduce ambiguity. It can let regulatory systems engage a clearer target. A person who says, "I am afraid," may already be changing the loop. A person who says, "I am not in danger, I am exhausted," may give the brain a different explanation for the same heaviness. Still, this power has limits. The body cannot be talked out of every state. A slow breath cannot undo every trauma. A sentence cannot repair every illness. But emotions are not sealed boxes. They are dynamic patterns. Change one important input, and the whole pattern can shift a little. Change breath, posture, context, interpretation, sleep, touch, distance, or the presence of another person, and the brain receives a different field of evidence. That is why emotion can be both real and mistaken. A feeling can be sincerely experienced and still be built from an outdated prediction. A person may feel unsafe in a safe room because the nervous system has learned that similar cues once preceded danger. The fear is not fake. The body is truly changing. But the model guiding the body may belong to another time. It may be using old data to solve a new moment. Here, emotion stops looking like the enemy of reason. It becomes a form of biological inference. Sometimes it is fast and accurate, sometimes it is protective but outdated, sometimes it opens perception, sometimes it narrows it too much. The question is not whether feelings are true or false in a simple way. The question is what information the body is using, what prediction the brain is making, and whether the current world still matches that prediction. Here, the familiar division between mind and body begins to fail. If emotion were only a thought, physical conditions would not matter so much. Sleep loss would not change mood with such force. Pain would not bend attention. Hunger would not sharpen irritation. Hormones, illness, caffeine, breathing, posture, and touch would not influence the tone of experience. But they do. They do it not by overriding the self from outside, but because the self is already embodied. At the same time, if emotion were only a body signal, every heartbeat pattern would have a fixed meaning. Every person with a fast pulse would feel the same thing. Every shallow breath would equal one emotion. That is not how human feeling works. Context matters. Memory matters. Culture and language matter. The face in front of us matters. A body signal becomes emotional through interpretation, but the interpretation is never free from the body. The real system lies between the extremes. Emotion is constructed but not invented from nothing. It is biological, but not locked to one organ. It is subjective, but it has measurable traces. It is personal, but not fully private. The older language of emotion often points to the brain's so-called limbic system. That phrase can be useful, but only if it is not treated as a little emotional animal living below a rational human brain. Emotion is not produced by one primitive control room. It involves many networks, regions that help detect significance, regions that connect memory and context, regions that map bodily states, regions that regulate attention, regions that plan action, and regions that help reappraise what is happening. The amygdala, for example, is often described as a fear center. That is too simple. It helps the brain detect biologically important signals, especially those linked with threat or uncertainty, but it is not a single button labeled fear. The hippocampus contributes memory and context. Prefrontal regions help hold a broader picture, inhibit immediate impulses, and reinterpret situations. The insula helps integrate the internal condition of the body, making heartbeat, breath, nausea, warmth, tension, and visceral pressure part of conscious awareness. Together, these systems do not simply produce feelings, they help regulate a living organism in a changing world. This becomes clearer when a person is under stress. The brain does not merely notice a difficult situation, it may predict that energy will be needed, and the body begins to prepare. Adrenaline and related chemical signals help mobilize resources. The heart works differently. Breathing changes. Digestion may slow. The muscles become more ready. Attention shifts toward what could go wrong. This response can be useful when a real demand is present. The problem appears when the system cannot return, or when it prepares for danger based on a prediction no longer matched to reality. Chronic stress is not just a bad mood extended over time. It is repeated regulation under load. A body that keeps preparing for threat pays for it in sleep, digestion, pain sensitivity, immune signaling, concentration, and emotional flexibility. The cost is not mystical, it is metabolic and neural. A system built to shift states becomes strained when one state dominates too long. This is why recovery matters as much as reaction. The body needs not only the ability to mobilize, but the ability to come back. A nervous system that never rises cannot meet life. A nervous system that never settles cannot repair. Emotion, at its healthiest, is not permanent calm. It is movement with return. It is the capacity to adjust and then rejoin a wider range of possibilities. The process could seem to remain inside one person. A brain predicts, a body responds. The heart, breath, muscles, and organs feed information back. The person feels fear, relief, anger, sadness, tenderness, or anticipation. Complex but still private. Yet human emotion almost never stays sealed inside one organism. Walk into a room just after an argument, and the body often knows something before the mind has evidence. No one needs to say, there has been conflict here. The signals may be small. A voice is too flat. Someone's smile arrives late. A person holds the shoulders too still. Eye contact breaks too quickly. Breathing sounds clipped. The spacing between bodies has changed. Ordinary intuition may call this atmosphere, but atmosphere is not empty poetry. It can be the nervous system reading dozens of weak signals at once and compressing them into one bodily impression. For a social species, the emotional state of others is part of the environment. A frightened group can mean danger nearby. A relaxed caregiver can mean safety for a child. A hostile face can matter before a sentence is spoken. A gentle tone can begin lowering defense before the words are fully processed. The brain is not only interpreting objects and events, it is interpreting other nervous systems. This is not paranormal, it is more precise and more interesting than that. Emotion moves between people through ordinary channels that are easy to underestimate. Facial expression, gaze, posture, breathing rhythm, vocal tone, timing, distance, touch, and shared attention. A tense jaw can make a conversation feel harder. A softening voice can reduce defensiveness. Fast speech can pull others into urgency. A long pause can make a group brace for impact. These are physical signals, and they matter because bodies are built to read them. Even silence has structure. Silence after affection feels different from silence after insult. The difference may not be in the absence of sound, but in the posture, timing, breathing, facial tone, and expectation surrounding it. The nervous system measures more than words. It measures readiness. It measures openness. It measures whether another body appears prepared to attack, withdraw, collapse, or connect. This process is sometimes called emotional contagion, though the word contagion can be misleading. Emotions do not spread like identical viruses. One person's fear does not enter another person unchanged. Instead, another person's state becomes input. Your nervous system samples it, compares it with memory and context, and generates its own response. Someone else's panic may make you panic, or it may make you become unusually calm, because your role in that moment becomes stabilizing. Another person's grief may bring tears, or it may create a quiet protective focus. What spreads is not a copy. It is a change in the conditions under which your own body regulates. The deepest form of this exchange begins early in life. An infant does not regulate alone. The child's nervous system develops in contact with another nervous system. Warmth, rhythm, smell, voice, rocking, gaze, feeding, touch, and repeated return after distress. The adult does not merely tell the infant to calm down. The adult provides a pattern the infant's body can use. Over time, regulation is learned through relationship. That principle does not vanish in adulthood. It becomes subtler. A steady person beside us can make a difficult situation more bearable, not because they transfer calm as a substance, but because their presence changes the information available to the body. Their tone, timing, posture, and responsiveness can signal that the organism does not need maximum defense. A hostile or unpredictable person can do the opposite. Even before open conflict, the body may prepare. Co-regulation is the term for this shared adjustment. It does not mean dependence in a weak sense. It means nervous systems are social by design. Humans do not only exchange ideas, they exchange timing, tension, signals of safety, and signals of threat. A room can become easier to think in because one person slows down. A conversation can become harder because one person's defensiveness makes everyone else monitor themselves. The body is always listening, even when the conscious mind is busy with content. Mirror neuron systems are sometimes brought into this conversation, but they should not be inflated into a complete explanation of empathy. Certain neural systems respond both when we perform an action and when we observe another performing a related action. This helps link perception and action. But human emotional understanding is larger than any one mechanism. It includes memory, prediction, attention, culture, bodily state. learned patterns, and the meaning of the relationship. Empathy is not one magic circuit. It is a layered process in which another person's visible state becomes part of our own internal modelling. The important point is simpler and stronger. The boundary around an emotion is not as clean as it feels. A feeling may begin with a bodily shift inside one person, but the face changes, the voice changes, the rhythm of movement changes, the space around the person changes. Other bodies detect those changes and begin adjusting. A private state becomes a public signal before it becomes a spoken confession. Sometimes the person who is angry does not know how angry they look. Sometimes the person who is afraid does not notice their breath has changed. Sometimes the person who's calm alters the pace of a room without saying anything important. Everyday language struggles to describe this without reaching for vague words. We say someone gives off tension. We say a room feels heavy. We say calm spreads. We say a person has a warm presence or a cold presence. The language sounds imprecise because consciousness does not list the signals it used. It gives us the summary. The body has already done the sampling. Science does not need to accept the strongest version of these phrases to take the experience seriously. A room does not need an invisible emotional fluid for tension to spread through it. It only needs nervous systems sensitive to voice, gaze, breath, movement, and expectation. It only needs bodies that constantly prepare for what other bodies may do next. The ordinary mechanisms are strong enough. This is especially clear in groups. A crowd can shift state quickly because each person is reading not only the original event, but the reactions of others. One sudden movement turns heads. Those heads turning become a signal. Someone inhales sharply. Someone else steps back. A few bodies prepare, and their preparation becomes visible. The group may begin to respond before any single person has a complete explanation. In safer settings, the reverse can also happen. A leader who speaks slowly, keeps a stable tone, and leaves space between sentences may help many nervous systems remain organized enough to think. The body is not only listening to what is said, it is listening to the timing of the social field. That timing matters because emotion and attention are linked. In fear, attention narrows. In trust, it can widen. In shame, the body may want to hide. In anger, it may lean toward confrontation. In grief, movement may slow, and the future may feel physically farther away. These are not merely metaphors. They are shifts in how the organism prepares to act. When several people begin sharing similar cues, the range of actions available in the room can change. A meeting can become defensive before the real topic appears. A family dinner can become fragile because everyone is avoiding one name. A hospital room can become calmer when a doctor explains clearly and pauses long enough for the patient to breathe. A classroom can become restless when one child's agitation begins altering the pace of attention around them. The emotional state of one person is not omnipotent, but it can become part of the environment others must regulate within. The shift is decisive. Emotion is not just a message inside the self. It is a biological pattern that can cross into behavior, and behavior becomes information for other biological systems. The old private model begins to fracture. If emotions lived only in the mind, then the body would not change so early. If they lived only in the body, then context would not matter so deeply. If they belonged only to one person, then rooms would not change when one nervous system enters them. The measured reality is less simple and more precise. Emotion forms through body and brain, is shaped by prediction and memory, and then leaves traces in breath, voice, posture, gaze, and timing. Those traces become part of the world another brain must interpret. A single emotion, then, does not end at the skin in the way we assume. It cannot float freely outside the body as a force, but it can move through signals. It can reshape a conversation. It can narrow or widen another person's attention. It can make muscles brace across a room. It can make a child settle against a steady chest. It can make a group prepare for danger before anyone can explain why. The wave is not mystical, it is biological. And because it is biological, it has limits. It weakens when signals are hidden or ambiguous. It depends on context. It can be misread. It can be blocked by distrust, exhaustion, distraction, or cultural difference. A calm person cannot simply force a whole room into peace. An anxious person does not automatically infect everyone nearby. Human nervous systems are responsive, not empty. They interpret, they resist, they remember. But even with those limits, the implication is sharp. The body is not an isolated instrument playing emotion only for itself. It is one instrument in a space of other instruments, each adjusting to what it hears, sees, predicts, and feels. A heartbeat does not broadcast a secret command. A breath does not control another mind. Yet the visible and audible consequences of those rhythms can enter the shared field and change what becomes possible there. The original question returns with more force. Your body may begin an emotion before you can name it. Your brain may build the feeling from internal signals, memory, and context. Your heart and breath may help organize the state in which the world appears. Your face and voice may reveal the pattern before your words do. And another nervous system may answer it, not as a copy, but as a new regulation of its own. If one emotion can move this far through the body through perception and into the space between people, what happens when two nervous systems stop merely reacting to each other and begin, even briefly, to fall into rhythm? When the rhythms of the body stop pulling against each other, the result is not perfect stillness. A living body is not meant to hold one pure state forever. It must rise, settle, spend energy, conserve energy, scan for danger, return to digestion, speak, listen, move, stop, sleep, wake, repair. A machine may be judged by how consistently it repeats the same motion. A body is judged by something more difficult, how well it can change state without losing its organization. This is why the idea of coherence is easy to misunderstand. It does not mean the heart becomes perfectly regular. It does not mean emotion turns into a clean wave that controls the world outside the skin. It does not mean the body enters some flawless harmony where stress, grief, anger, or pain disappear. In a biological system, too much rigidity can be as dangerous as too much chaos. The goal is not a frozen calm. The goal is adaptive rhythm. Under ordinary stress, the body can become like a group of instruments beginning the same difficult piece without listening closely to each other. The breath rises high in the chest. The heart responds more sharply. The muscles hold readiness even when no movement is needed. The jaw tightens, the stomach changes tone, and attention begins to spend most of its resources on what could go wrong. Each part has a reason for what it's doing. Together, the pattern may become costly. Coherence begins when some of these loops become easier for the organism to read. A slower breath changes pressure inside the chest. A longer exhale influences the timing of the heart through parasympathetic pathways. A less defensive posture changes the signals coming from muscles and joints. Attention stops ricocheting between possible threats and becomes stable enough to include more of the room. Nothing supernatural has happened. The body has simply received a different set of internal measurements. That phrase, internal measurements, matters. The brain does not have direct access to a pure emotional truth. It receives signals. Carbon dioxide levels shift with breathing. Stretch receptors in the lungs report movement. Baroreceptors in blood vessels help monitor pressure. The vagus nerve carries information from organs toward the brain. Muscles send their own reports about tension and position. The brain integrates these signals with memory, expectation, and the social context. Then, from that moving evidence, a felt state emerges. So when a person takes a slow breath and begins to feel different, the breath is not merely symbolic. It is mechanical. It moves the diaphragm. It changes the rhythm of pressure around the heart. It alters the balance between inhalation and exhalation. It changes how the body reports its own condition upward. A thought may say, "I should calm down," but the body may not believe that thought until the incoming signals begin to match it. This is why certain emotional states can support coherence more easily than others. Gratitude, compassion, quiet trust, and a sense of safety often shift the orientation of the organism. Attention is no longer organized only around lack, danger, or self-protection. The face may soften, the voice may drop slightly, the breath may become less shallow. The body does not have to spend as much energy preparing for rejection or attack. These changes are small, but in regulation. Small repeated signals matter. Gratitude is not powerful because it decorates suffering with pleasant language. It changes the direction of attention toward what has been received, not only what is missing. Compassion is not merely a moral idea. It can change whether another person's pain is treated by the nervous system as a threat to flee from, an attack to defend against, or a signal to approach carefully. Safety is not laziness. It is a condition in which the body can afford to perceive more than danger. Still, coherence cannot become another demand placed on a struggling body. A person in grief, illness, poverty, trauma, or exhaustion does not need to be told that their biology would improve if only they entered harmony. That turns regulation into blame. The nervous system has reasons for its alarms. Some alarms are outdated, some are exaggerated, but many began as attempts to survive real pressure. Regulation does not begin by denying those reasons. It begins when the body encounters conditions under which maximum defense is no longer the only available option. A calm body is not a morally superior body. It is a body that, at least for a moment, has enough information to lower the guard. That distinction protects the science from becoming cruelty. It also makes the mechanism more precise. When a slow exhale helps, it is not because the person has become better. It is because the exhale enters a physiological loop. When a safe voice helps, it is not because words are magic. It is because tone, timing, facial expression, and predictability give the nervous system evidence that the social environment may not require full defense. When touch helps, it is not because touch carries an invisible essence. It is because pressure, warmth, familiarity, and context can alter sensory input and autonomic regulation. The body listens through many doors. One door is breath, another is the heart, another is the skin, another is the immune system, which is often treated as if it were separate from emotional life, waiting in the background like a medical technician. It is not separate. Immune signaling can influence fatigue, mood, motivation, appetite, and pain sensitivity. Inflammation can make the world feel heavier, not because the world has changed, but because the body is shifting priorities toward defense and repair. The brain interprets that internal condition as part of the total state of the organism. This is the point where the old language of mind over body begins to fail again. It imagines two separate forces, one commanding and the other obeying. But the real system is not a ruler and a servant. It is a network of feedback loops. The nervous system influences hormones. Hormones influence immune signaling. Immune molecules influence the brain. Sleep changes emotional regulation. Pain changes attention. Social isolation changes stress physiology. A diagnosis can change breathing before any treatment begins. A trusted explanation can lower threat before a drug enters the bloodstream. The narrow claim is already enough. Meaning can become biology when the brain and body use it to regulate. The clearest place to see this is not in miracles, it is in pain. Pain seems, at first, like the simplest possible body signal. Tissue is damaged, nerves report damage, and the brain receives the message. Ordinary intuition expects pain to behave like a fire alarm wired directly to injury. More damage, more pain, less damage, less pain. But pain does not obey that simple scale. Soldiers have sometimes been badly injured and reported surprisingly little pain in the moment. A small injury can become intensely painful when it seems dangerous. Chronic pain can persist after tissue has healed. A harmless sensation can become painful if the brain interprets it as threat. Pain is not imaginary when this happens. It is constructed by a real nervous system trying to estimate danger. That one shift changes everything about expectation. If pain were just a line from damaged tissue to conscious suffering, context would barely matter. The colour of a pill, the confidence of a clinician, the meaning of a diagnosis, the memory of past injury, or the presence of another person should not change it much. Yet context can change pain because pain is not only a report of tissue condition, it is a protective output. The brain asks, How much danger does this signal represent for this body right now? The placebo effect enters through that question. It is often dismissed as fake healing, as if a person merely imagines improvement. That dismissal misses the mechanism. When a placebo reduces pain, the pain was not fake. The nervous system has internal systems for modulating pain, and expectation can sometimes activate them. Endogenous opioids, dopamine pathways, and descending pain control circuits can change how incoming signals are amplified or dampened. The body is not responding to nothing. It is responding to a meaning that has recruited biology. A pill without an active drug is chemically inert in one sense, but the ritual around it may not be biologically inert. The clinical setting, the explanation, the memory of previous relief, the trust in treatment, and the expectation of improvement all become inputs. The brain does not only ask what molecule has arrived, it asks what this event means for prediction and action. If the event signals likely relief, the body may shift towards systems that reduce threat and pain. The change is limited, but it is measurable enough to disturb the simple model. The nocebo effect shows the same doorway from the other side. If a person expects harm, watches the body for danger, and interprets ordinary sensations as signs of worsening, the nervous system may increase vigilance. Harmless internal noise can be promoted into threat. Pain can become sharper. Nausea, fatigue, dizziness, or discomfort can be amplified. Fear changes attention, and attention changes what the brain samples. The body then responds to the sampled threat, creating more sensations to monitor. A loop forms again, but now the loop is built from expectation. This is why words in medicine have physical weight. A careless phrase can lodge inside prediction. A diagnosis delivered without context can make the body feel less safe before any biological progression has occurred. A long list of possible side effects can be necessary for informed consent, but the way it is framed matters because expectation can alter symptom perception. A clinician's calm clarity cannot cure every disease, but it can change the threat level surrounding the disease. That threat level affects sleep, pain, adherence, stress hormones, and the patient's willingness to move, eat, ask questions, and return for care. This is not an argument against medicine, it is an argument for understanding medicine more completely. Surgery, antibiotics, insulin, chemotherapy, antivirals, anesthesia, vaccines, and emergency care do not depend on positive thinking to be real. A broken bone does not knit because someone forms a pleasant belief. An infection does not vanish because a person chooses hope. But the organism receiving treatment is not a chemical container. It is a predicting, sensing, socially responsive body. The meaning around treatment can either support the biology of recovery or add unnecessary threat to it. The difference between a strong claim and an exaggerated claim is crucial here. Placebo does not prove that the mind can heal anything at will. Nocebo does not prove that fear creates every illness. Psychoneuroimmunology does not reduce disease to emotion. Those stronger claims collapse under the complexity of biology. Genes, pathogens, injuries, toxins, age, inflammation, chance mutations, environment, and access to care all matter. But it would also be wrong to pretend that emotion and expectation are powerless simply because they are not omnipotent. The body's regulatory systems are porous to meaning, not infinitely porous, not magically porous, mechanically porous. Stress shows this with a different kind of pressure. A short stress response can be useful. It mobilizes energy, sharpens attention, and prepares action. The heart works harder. Glucose becomes more available. The body reallocates resources, but a response designed for temporary demand becomes damaging when it is repeatedly activated without enough recovery. Blood pressure patterns may shift. Sleep becomes lighter. Pain thresholds can change. Immune communication may be altered. The digestive system may lose its usual rhythm. The body begins living as if the future is always about to require defense. This is one of the quiet physical consequences of chronic uncertainty. The danger does not have to be dramatic every day. It can be unstable housing, unpredictable conflict, social exclusion, financial pressure, caregiving without rest, racism, long-term loneliness, or the constant need to monitor another person's mood. The body keeps sampling the world. If the samples repeatedly say, "Stay ready," the nervous system may begin treating readiness as the baseline. A baseline is not just a mood, it is the setting from which new events are interpreted. When the baseline shifts, ordinary events arrive into a different body. A delayed reply becomes sharper, a neutral tone becomes colder, a small ache becomes more alarming, a crowded room becomes harder to filter, a memory becomes more available, a child's cry becomes unbearable rather than simply urgent. The same external signal meets an organism already carrying load, and the response changes. This is why stress cannot be understood only by counting events. It also depends on recovery, predictability, control, support, and the body's history of what similar signals once meant. Psychoneuroimmunology sits exactly in this complicated territory. It studies how psychological processes, the nervous system, endocrine signaling, and immune function influence each other. The field does not say one emotion equals one disease. That would be too simple and too cruel. Instead, it asks how stress, loneliness, depression, sleep, inflammation, social connection, and expectation move through shared biological pathways. The immune system is not merely a defense army waiting for germs. It is part of the body's communication network. Inflammation, for example, can change behavior. During illness, the body often produces fatigue, social withdrawal, reduced appetite, and increased sensitivity. These are not random symptoms. They can be part of an organized response that conserves energy for healing and reduces exposure to further danger. But if inflammatory signaling becomes chronic or poorly regulated, those same protective patterns can become burdensome. The body's defense language begins to alter mood, motivation, and perception even when no obvious external threat is present. The arrow runs both ways. Stress can influence immune signaling through hormonal and autonomic pathways. Sleep disruption can affect inflammatory balance. Social isolation can change stress physiology. Supportive relationships can reduce threat load, not because affection is a drug in the simple sense, but because safety changes what the nervous system has to prepare for. The immune system does not take orders from thoughts, but it is sensitive to the body's total regulatory state. And that state includes emotion, expectation, rest, and social context. Here the science becomes more delicate. The fact that stress can influence biology should never become a weapon against the person under stress. A body under load is not failing morally, it is adapting, often to conditions it did not choose. Blaming a sick person for not regulating better is a misuse of biology. The safer claim is narrower and more humane, because body systems communicate, reducing threat, increasing support, improving sleep, and creating predictability can matter biologically. They are not substitutes for treatment, they are part of the environment in which treatment occurs. A hospital room can illustrate this without needing a miracle. Two patients may receive the same procedure. One is spoken to clearly, touched with consent, given predictable information, and surrounded by people who help them feel oriented. Another is left confused, frightened, deprived of sleep, and unsure what each sensation means. The surgical technique may be the same, the medication may be the same, but the regulatory environment is not the same. One body receives treatment inside a field of relative safety, the other receives treatment inside a field of threat. The difference may not determine the outcome by itself. Biology is too complex for that. But it can influence pain, sleep, stress hormones, cooperation with rehabilitation, appetite, and the ability to ask for help before a problem worsens. Meaning becomes physical through behavior, physiology, and prediction. This is also why hope has to be understood carefully. Hope is not a supernatural force that guarantees recovery. It is not proof that a person can choose an outcome by feeling correctly. But hope can change behavior. It can help a person continue treatment, eat, move, sleep, reach out, tolerate uncertainty, and imagine a future worth protecting. Those behaviors have biological consequences. Despair can also have consequences, not because despair is a personal failure, but because the body and hopelessness may stop investing in repair, movement, and connection in the same way. The mechanism is not wish versus fate. It is regulation versus collapse of options. When a body feels that nothing it does matters, the nervous system may conserve effort differently. Motivation changes. Pain can become harder to bear. Time can feel heavier. The future can lose its pull on present behavior. In contrast, when a person experiences even a small amount of agency, the brain can organize action around a possible improvement. Agency changes prediction. Prediction changes physiology. Physiology changes what actions remain available. The loop does not guarantee healing, but it can alter the path the body travels. This brings the earlier question about emotional rhythms into a wider frame. Coherence is not only about heart and breath aligning for a few minutes, it is also about whether the organism can find reliable returns from threat into repair. Placebo is not only about a sugar pill, it is about how expectation enters pain control and bodily interpretation. Psychoneuroimmunology is not only about stress making people sick, it is about communication between systems that were once imagined as separate. The simple picture keeps failing at the same seam. Mind over here, body over there, emotion as private, biology as mechanical, meaning as unreal unless a molecule carries it. But in the actual organism, a sentence can change breath. Breath can change cardiac timing. Cardiac signals can influence perception. Expectation can change pain. Immune signaling can change mood. A relationship can change threat load. The separation is convenient for language, but the body does not obey it. And yet, there is another limit to keep clear. Not every emotional experience leaves a lasting biological mark. The body is built to absorb many short disturbances and return. A flash of irritation, a brief worry, a moment of embarrassment, a difficult conversation followed by repair. These do not rewrite the organism in any simple permanent way. Life requires transient stress. Without it, the body would not learn, strengthen, adapt, or respond. The issue is not emotional intensity alone. It is repetition without repair. A storm that passes through a forest may break branches and leave the soil wet. A climate that changes over years alters what can grow there at all. The body has a similar distinction. One fear response is weather. Chronic threat begins to resemble climate. It changes the probabilities of future states. It trains attention. It shapes expectation. It may alter hormone rhythms, sleep architecture, pain sensitivity, and immune communication. The body begins to anticipate the world that repeatedly arrived. Some traces go even closer to the cell. Genes are often imagined as destiny, as a fixed text written at conception and then simply read aloud throughout life. But a cell does not read every part of the genetic text in the same way at all times. Different tissues use different genes. Different conditions turn certain genes up or down. The sequence of DNA is one layer. Gene expression is another. The sequence is the letters. Expression is which passages are used, how often, and under what conditions. Epigenetics studies mechanisms that influence gene expression without changing the underlying DNA sequence. These mechanisms include chemical tags that can affect how accessible parts of the genome are and changes in the proteins around which DNA is packaged. The details are complex, but the central idea is accessible. The genome is not a fixed program being performed identically in every cell. It is a library under regulation. The cell must decide which instructions matter for its current role and environment. Stress can influence some of these regulatory systems. Hormones such as cortisol enter cells and interact with receptors that affect gene transcription. Immune signals can influence which inflammatory pathways become more or less active. Early life environments can shape stress response systems while they are still developing. In animal studies, patterns of caregiving have been linked to later differences in stress reactivity through epigenetic mechanisms. In humans, the evidence is more difficult to interpret because human lives are complex, but researchers have found associations between adversity, stress biology, and epigenetic markers in certain contexts. Precision matters here. Epigenetics does not mean thoughts rewrite DNA. It does not mean every emotion leaves a permanent molecular scar. It does not mean trauma is destiny. It does not mean suffering passes unchanged into the next generation, like a sealed biological curse. Those versions are too simple and too dramatic. The safer and stronger claim is that experience can influence biological regulation, and under some conditions, especially during development or chronic stress, those influences may reach mechanisms that help cells decide how genes are expressed. The body's memory is not stored in one place. It may live in synaptic patterns in the brain. It may live in conditioned autonomic responses. It may live in muscle readiness and posture. It may live in hormone rhythms, immune sensitivity, sleep patterns, pain thresholds, and learned expectations. Some of these traces can change quickly. Others require repeated safety, treatment, time, and new experience. The important point is not that the past controls the body forever. The important point is that the past can become biological enough that simple advice cannot reach it. A person who startles easily may not be choosing fear. Their nervous system may have learned that sudden sound predicts danger. A person who feels shame in ordinary conflict may not be weak. Their body may have learned that disagreement once threatened attachment or safety. A person who cannot relax in a quiet room may not be refusing peace. Quiet may remove distractions and allow internal alarm to become more audible. The body remembers through prediction, not only through conscious recall. This is why regulation is often slow. The brain cannot simply erase an old model because a new fact has been stated. It needs repeated evidence. It needs enough safety for the body to test a different response. It needs relationships, environments, practices, treatment, and time that reduce prediction error without overwhelming the system. A nervous system trained by danger may require many encounters with non-danger before it trusts the new pattern. Even then, trust may arrive unevenly. In small physiological increments, one less held breath, one shorter recovery after conflict, one night of deeper sleep, one conversation in which the body does not prepare for attack. Healing in this sense is not forgetting, it is updating. The idea of updating keeps the science away from fatalism. If experience can shape regulation, the new experience can also reshape it, though not always easily and not always completely. Neuroplasticity allows neural networks to change with use. Autonomic patterns can shift through repeated practice and context. Pain systems can sometimes become less sensitized when threat decreases, and movement becomes safe again. Immune and endocrine rhythms can improve with sleep, treatment, nutrition, reduce stress, and social support. None of this is instant. None of it is guaranteed. But the body is not a stone tablet. At the same time, the body is not clay in the hands of willpower. That metaphor gives too much power to conscious intention, and too little respect to biology. A person cannot simply decide to become regulated on command. They can participate in conditions that support regulation. They can learn signals. They can practice breath, movement, attention, and naming. They can seek relationships that reduce threat rather than increase it. They can use medicine, therapy, sleep, food, and structure. The conscious self becomes one influence among many, not the sovereign ruler. That may sound less dramatic than saying the mind controls the body, but it is more useful. Control suggests a switch. Regulation suggests a system. A switch either works or fails. A system can be trained, supported, overloaded, repaired, and gradually reorganized. The body does not need domination from the mind, it needs information it can trust. Trust, in biology, is not sentiment. It is prediction with low threat. A trusted person is one whose behavior becomes sufficiently stable that the nervous system does not need to monitor every movement for danger. A trusted room is one where the body can spend less energy scanning exits. A trusted treatment is one whose purpose and effects are explained clearly enough that sensations do not immediately become alarms. A trusted breath is one that the brain has experienced enough times as a pathway back from arousal. The measurable side of trust is subtle. It may appear as a lower startle response, improved sleep, more flexible heart rate variability, less muscle guarding, better tolerance of uncertainty, more willingness to make eye contact, or a reduced need to rehearse threat scenarios. None of these proves trust by itself, but together they show that safety is not merely a belief, it is an altered workload across the organism. Here, the theme of co-regulation returns in a deeper form. If bodies learn regulation in relationship, then repeated social environments can become part of long-term biology. A harsh environment may train vigilance. A reliable environment may train return. A chaotic caregiver, workplace or community may make the nervous system treat unpredictability as normal. A steady source of repair may teach the body that conflict is not always abandonment, and arousal is not always danger. This does not make relationships a cure for every injury. It makes them part of the regulatory landscape. The same person may feel different in different bodies of company, not because they become a different organism in a poetic sense, but because the signals around them change what the nervous system expects. A person can think more clearly with one friend than another, sleep more deeply in one home than another, feel pain more sharply in one social context than another. The body is continuously asking whether the surroundings permit repair. A striking consequence follows from this. Some emotions may be impossible to understand by looking only at the individual. Anxiety may live partly in a person's nervous system, partly in their history, partly in their sleep, partly in their hormones, partly in their current environment, and partly in the signals coming from nearby people. Anger may be a boundary signal, a threat response, a learned defense, a pain cover, or a social contagion shaped by a group's rhythm. Sadness may be grief, exhaustion, inflammation, isolation, or the body's way of conserving motion after loss. The feeling is real, but its roots may spread across systems. This makes emotional truth more complicated, not less serious. A feeling is not automatically an accurate map of the world, but it is usually an accurate event inside the body. Something is being regulated, protected, predicted, or remembered. The task is to ask what the feeling is doing, not only what it is called. Is it mobilizing energy? Is it narrowing attention? Is it asking for withdrawal? Is it protecting a boundary? Is it repeating an old warning? Is it responding to an actual danger? Is it being amplified by sleep loss, illness, or another person's alarm? The answer may change the intervention. A fear based on present danger may require action. A fear based on an old prediction may require safety and updating. Irritation from hunger may require food, not moral analysis. Grief may require presence, not correction. Shame may require relational repair. Pain may require medical care, movement, reassurance, or all of them together. Once emotion is seen as regulation, the question becomes practical and physical. What information does the organism need in order to respond more accurately? There is intensity in this, but it is quiet. It means a human being is never only thinking. Every thought arrives in a body with a history. Every belief is carried by breath, chemistry, posture, and social memory. Every emotion is both message and movement, and every attempt to change an emotion has to work with the body that produced it, not against it, as if it were an obstacle. The old split between the mental and the physical is convenient, but convenience is not truth. A frightening idea can raise the heart rate. A safe hand can change breathing. A drug can alter mood. A fever can alter thought. A memory can tighten the stomach. A prediction can reduce pain. Chronic threat can tune stress systems. Repeated safety can help retune them. These are not separate categories touching at the edges. They are one organism communicating with itself. By this point, the first question has become much sharper. It is no longer just, can emotion affect the body? Of course it can. The more difficult question is how far the effect reaches, through which mechanisms and where the boundaries are. A heartbeat can change with fear. A breath can influence regulation. Expectation can alter pain. Stress can shape immune signaling. Long experience can train the nervous system and may, under certain conditions, influence gene expression. The chain is real. But every link has a mechanism and a limit. Those limits matter because the next temptation is always to leap past biology. If emotion can change pain, someone will ask whether it can change matter itself. If expectation can alter the body, someone will ask whether belief alters the external world directly. If stress can leave cellular traces, someone will ask whether thoughts write themselves into reality beyond the organism. The impulse is understandable. The biology is already intimate and strange. But intimacy is not permission to abandon mechanism. Before any stronger claim can be trusted, it has to pass through the same narrow gate. What is the signal? What carries it? What receives it? How strong is it? How long does it last? Can it be measured repeatedly? Does it survive noise? Does it explain more than ordinary physiology already explains? Without those questions, mystery becomes too easy. With them, the mystery becomes harder, cleaner, and more interesting. The body has shown that meaning can become biological, but if meaning is biological inside us, where exactly does its influence stop? The answer begins with a boundary. Not a hard wall, not a simple line at the skin, but a biological and physical boundary that every strong claim has to cross. If an emotion is going to affect something beyond the body that feels it, there must be a carrier. There must be a signal. There must be a receiver sensitive enough to detect it. There must be a path through noise. And if the claim is meant to be scientific, the effect must be measured in a way that can survive careful testing. This sounds less dramatic than saying emotion is energy, but it is more powerful because it asks the question that determines everything: what exactly is moving? A living body does emit and transmit many things. The heart produces electrical activity strong enough to be measured at the skin. The brain produces electrical patterns detectable through the scalp, though blurred by bone, tissue, and distance. Muscles generate electrical signals when they contract. The body releases heat. It gives off chemical traces through breath, sweat, skin, and metabolism. It produces sound in speech, breathing, movement, and even silence shaped by timing. It reflects light through posture, face, and gesture. In very faint ways, living tissues can emit tiny amounts of light from biochemical reactions, far below ordinary perception. So the body is not sealed. But being unsealed is not the same as broadcasting meaning in every direction. A candle gives off heat, light, and chemical products. That does not mean it sends a sentence into the room. A heartbeat generates measurable electrical activity. That does not mean its emotional pattern can directly regulate another body at a distance through electromagnetic force. The difference between emission and communication is structure. A signal must carry information in a form another system can detect and use. The word field becomes both useful and dangerous here. In physics, a field is a precise idea. An electric field, a magnetic field, a gravitational field. These are not moods or metaphors. They describe how physical quantities exist through space and affect objects that can interact with them. A compass needle responds to a magnetic field because it has the right physical properties. A charged particle responds to an electric field because charge is part of the interaction. A receiver does not respond because meaning is beautiful. It responds because the coupling exists. The human body has real electromagnetic activity. Electrocardiography measures the heart's electrical patterns. Electroencephalography measures summed electrical activity of the brain from the scalp. Magnetocardiography and magnetoencephalography can detect extremely weak magnetic fields produced by heart and brain activity. But those measurements require sensitive instruments and careful conditions. The existence of a detectable field is not the same thing as evidence that the field carries emotional influence into another person in ordinary life. The constraint is physical. Electromagnetic fields weaken with distance. The environment is crowded with stronger signals. Power lines, phones, appliances, lighting systems, movement, thermal noise, and the electrical activity of every body nearby. A faint biological field does not become influential simply because it is measurable with a sensitive instrument. To affect another organism, it would need to remain strong enough, organized enough, and meaningfully coupled to a biological receiver. Without that, the signal disappears into the background. This does not make the body insignificant. It makes the question sharper. A person can absolutely change another person's physiology. A steady voice can slow breathing. A sudden shout can increase heart rate. Touch can reduce distress under the right conditions. Eye contact can alter attention. A shared rhythm can coordinate movement. A trusted presence can reduce threat load. These effects are strong because the receiving system has evolved to detect them. The eyes detect facial motion. The ears detect tone and timing. The skin detects pressure and warmth. The brain detects social meaning. The body is filled with receivers, but they are not vague, they are specific. Weak signals can matter enormously when the receiver is built for them. Hormones can act at low concentrations because cells have receptors. A small change in membrane voltage can help determine whether a neuron fires. A faint odour can alter perception if the olfactory system detects the chemical. A whisper can matter more than a loud machine if the nervous system recognises the voice behind it. Biology is not impressed by strength alone, it is impressed by fit. That is the key distinction. A signal may be weak and still meaningful if a receiver exists, but a signal cannot be assumed meaningful just because it is weak and mysterious. Every claim has to show the path, what is emitted, how it travels, what detects it, what threshold is crossed, and why the effect is not overwhelmed by ordinary noise. The term biofield tries to gather some of these questions into one word. At its most cautious, it can point to the fact that living bodies generate measurable electrical, magnetic, thermal, acoustic, chemical, and optical traces. At its strongest, in more speculative uses, it can imply a subtle organizing field around the body that carries health, intention, or emotional information in ways not yet well explained. The careful version is a question. The stronger version is a claim. They should not be treated as the same thing. The careful question is worth asking. What does a living body radiate, release, transmit, or display? Which of those outputs can another body detect? Which ones influence physiology? Which ones require touch, closeness, smell, vision, hearing, or shared attention? Which can be measured by instruments but not biologically used? Which are given meaning by the observer rather than carried by the signal itself? A body gives off heat, but heat does not carry the difference between grief and gratitude in any simple way. Sweat can contain chemical information, but human emotional chemosignaling is complex, subtle, and deeply context-dependent. A face can reveal distress, but culture, relationship, and attention influence how it is read. A heartbeat can be recorded, but another person does not hear the rhythm directly unless there is contact, sound, or a device. The body is constantly transmitting. But not every transmission is an emotional message. This is why everyday experience can be both accurate and misleading. People often sense things before they can describe them. A room may feel tense because small signals are converging, shorter answers, less eye contact, shallow breathing, unusual stillness, a voice held too tightly, bodies angled away from one another. The conscious mind does not list all of this. It gives a compressed feeling. Something is off. Then language reaches for the widest available word, energy, aura, vibe, field. Those words may preserve the experience, but they can hide the mechanism. If a person says someone has heavy energy, the phrase may point to a real perception. Facial tone, posture, timing, nervous system readiness, the emotional memory of previous encounters. But if the word energy stops the investigation, it becomes less precise than the body itself. The body detected something specific. The explanation made it vague. A better science of subtle human influence does not begin by mocking the experience. It begins by separating the experience from the interpretation. The experience may be real. The interpretation may be incomplete. A person may truly feel calmer with another person nearby, but the cause may be tone, breath, expectation, familiarity, attachment, touch, or learned safety, not an unmeasured field. Another person may truly feel uneasy, but the cause may be an old association. A subtle facial expression, or their own baseline arousal, not a hidden force in the room. The organism is sensitive enough that we do not need to exaggerate it. Consider touch. A hand placed gently on a shoulder, in the right relationship and at the right time, can change breathing. The pressure activates receptors in the skin. Warmth changes sensory input. The social meaning of the gesture matters. If the touch is welcome, it can signal support and reduce isolation. If the touch is unwelcome, it can increase threat. The same physical pressure can regulate or alarm depending on context. The signal is not just mechanical, and it is not just symbolic. It is both, because the skin and the brain belong to the same body. Voice works in a similar way. A calm voice is not merely a pleasant sound. It carries rhythm, pitch, pauses, volume, and predictability. The auditory system extracts these features rapidly. The brain compares them with memory and context. A voice that signals anger can prepare defense before the sentence is understood. A voice that signals steadiness can give the body permission to spend less energy scanning for danger. The effect is physical, but it travels through sound and meaning, not through a mysterious substance. Even a room's layout can regulate. A chair placed near an exit feels different from a chair trapping someone in a corner. A clinic with harsh light, rushed speech, and unexplained procedures gives the body different information than a room where the patient knows what will happen next. The nervous system does not separate architecture from emotion as neatly as language does. Space itself can become part of prediction. This is a quieter form of influence than the dramatic claims, but it reaches deeply. It explains why therapeutic relationships matter. It explains why bedside manner is not cosmetic. It explains why rituals of care can have effects even when their stated theory is uncertain. A ritual may organize attention, expectation, breathing, touch, social support, and time. Those components can change the body's state without proving every belief attached to the ritual. Many traditions speak of a subtle life force moving through the body or between people. Reiki, therapeutic touch, laying on of hands, prayer practices, and other forms of healing presence use different languages, but they often gather around one human need. When the body is suffering, it should not be alone. The value of that experience can be real even when the proposed mechanism remains unproven. A person may feel comforted, pain may feel more bearable, fear may reduce. The breathing may settle, a sense of being cared for may change the body's threat level. Modern science has to make a difficult distinction here. It must not dismiss the human value of care simply because the explanation is unsupported, but it also must not accept the explanation just because the experience is meaningful. Comfort is not proof of a subtle energy. Relaxation is not proof of a biofield mechanism. A beneficial ritual may work through attention, expectation, sensory input, social safety, and autonomic regulation. Those mechanisms are not lesser. They are real pathways. The stronger claims require stronger evidence. If a practice claims to directly transmit healing energy, the mechanism has to answer ordinary scientific questions. What physical signal is transferred? How is it generated by intention? How does it travel through space or tissue? What receptor detects it? Why does shielding, distance, or blinding not eliminate it? Can trained practitioners produce effects beyond expectation, relaxation, touch, warmth, social meaning, and chance? Can independent researchers repeat the effect under conditions that prevent unconscious cueing? These questions are sometimes treated as cold or hostile, but they are the same questions that protect any real discovery. A weak biological effect is not impossible. Biology is full of sensitivity, but sensitivity is not a license to skip mechanism. If the effect is there, careful testing should help reveal what carries it. If the effect weakens or disappears when cues, expectation, and context are controlled, then the narrower explanation becomes more likely. The narrower explanation can still be profound. A person in pain may need less threat, not only less tissue damage. A frightened body may need co-regulation, not only information. A lonely patient may need presence because isolation itself changes the load on the nervous system. These are not mystical statements. They're consequences of the body being social, predictive, and regulatory. The temptation to go beyond this often comes from one word: quantum. Quantum physics has a strange authority in modern culture because it genuinely reveals that microscopic nature does not behave like everyday intuition expects. Particles are not simply tiny solid objects with every property fixed in advance. A quantum system can be described by a superposition of possible states. Measurements do not merely reveal a little hidden object in the ordinary way. They involve physical interactions that produce definite records. Probability is built into the theory at a deep level. Because emotion also involves possibility, uncertainty, and observation, it is easy to place the two languages near each other. A person feels undecided, then a choice becomes real. A person is observed, then their behavior changes. A feeling is named, then it stabilizes. These psychological processes can sound quantum-like in ordinary speech, but similar words do not create a physical bridge. In quantum mechanics, measurement does not mean that a conscious human looks at something and mind power forces reality to choose. Measurement means that a quantum system becomes physically entangled with a measuring device or environment in a way that produces a stable outcome or record. The observer may be an instrument, it may be a detector, it may be a molecule in the environment. It does not have to be a person with emotions, intentions, or awareness. Decoherence is crucial here. A delicate quantum system can maintain certain quantum relationships only when it is sufficiently isolated from uncontrolled interactions. Once it interacts with the surrounding environment, information about its possible state spreads outward, and the fragile quantum coherence becomes unavailable for ordinary interference. In a warm, wet, chemically active body, molecules are colliding, vibrating, bonding, breaking apart, rotating, and exchanging energy constantly. The environment is noisy at the exact scale where delicate quantum states would need isolation. This does not mean quantum biology is false. Some biological processes have quantum aspects because all chemistry ultimately rests on quantum physics. Electron transfer, molecular bonding, enzyme behavior, photosynthetic energy transfer, and possibly some animal navigation mechanisms involve quantum-level physics in specific constrained ways. But this is very different from saying human emotions directly manipulate quantum fields in the world around us. A quantum effect in biology needs a protected mechanism. It needs a molecule, a timescale, a temperature condition, an interaction that can be modelled, and evidence that the effect matters for function. The body cannot simply be declared quantum and then used to explain every subtle experience. At that point, the word quantum stops doing scientific work and becomes decoration. The simple quantum leap fails for the same reason every unsupported field claim fails. Emotion is a real biological process. Quantum physics is real physics. But two real things do not automatically make one shared mechanism. To claim that emotion directly alters quantum states in daily reality, we would need to know the signal carrier, the coupling, the timescale, the protected state, the receiver, and the repeatable measurement. Without those, quantum language is metaphor, not evidence. Metaphor can still have value if it remains honest. Quantum theory can remind us that nature is not always arranged according to common sense. It can offer careful language about probability interaction and the relationship between the question asked and the answer obtained. Some models of decision-making even use mathematical structures inspired by quantum theory to describe cognitive paradoxes, preference shifts, and context-dependent choices. These are often called quantum-like models. But quantum-like does not mean quantum physical. A mathematical resemblance is not the same as a mechanism. Waves appear in water, sound, light, probability, and equations describing many systems. The shared mathematics does not make a lake, a violin note, and a photon the same object. Likewise, a model of human judgment may borrow a mathematical form without proving that the brain is literally running a quantum experiment in the everyday sense. This distinction may feel like it removes wonder, but it actually protects it. The real wonder is not that we can attach quantum words to emotion. The real wonder is that emotion already has a complex biology capable of changing pain, attention, heart rhythm, memory, immune communication, social behavior, and decision-making without needing a shortcut through unsupported physics. The body does not become less mysterious when we refuse the wrong explanation, it becomes more visible. A similar caution applies to hypotheses about fields of memory or form beyond individual bodies. Some ideas, such as morphic resonance, propose that nature may contain a kind of memory in which similar systems are influenced by previous similar systems. These ideas appeal to a real intuition. Life does not feel like a collection of isolated fragments. Habits, forms, cultures, rituals, and relationships seem to outlive individuals. Patterns appear to repeat. Families carry wounds and strengths. Societies inherit expectations long before individuals choose them. But appeal is not evidence. The stronger versions of these field-like claims do not have broad scientific consensus, and they lack the kind of repeatable, well-supported mechanism that would make them part of established biology. That does not mean every question behind them is foolish. It means the explanation must not outrun the evidence. There is a more grounded way to ask whether the mind is locked inside the skull. In one practical sense, it is not. When a person writes a reminder on paper, part of memory has moved into the environment. When a phone stores a calendar, the brain is no longer carrying the whole schedule alone. When a map guides movement through an unfamiliar city, orientation is distributed between brain, eyes, hand, symbol, and street. When language gives a person words for grief, boundary, trauma, tenderness, or dignity, thought is using a tool built by generations. When a trusted person helps regulate fear, the nervous system is using another body as part of its stabilizing environment. This is a milder form of extended mind, and it does not need an unproven field. It is strong enough on its own. The skull protects the brain, but it does not seal meaning inside. Thinking uses body, gesture, space, writing, tools, screens, homes, photographs, songs, calendars, rituals, and the remembered voices of other people. A person praying, journaling, holding a family object, listening to a familiar song, or reading an old message is not using neurons in darkness alone. The brain is coupled to an environment arranged by meaning. A notebook on a bedside table can become part of emotional regulation. It catches thoughts that would otherwise circle at night. A photograph can restore a social memory when the body feels alone. A medical explanation drawn on paper can reduce uncertainty because the patient can see the sequence of events instead of holding vague threat in the chest. A child's routine can help regulate sleep because the environment repeats a pattern the nervous system can predict. None of this is paranormal. It is embodied cognition. The mind does not float above the body, and the body does not float outside the world. They form loops with objects, people, symbols, and places. The effect can be ordinary enough to miss and strong enough to shape a life. Collective memory shows the same principle at a larger scale. A family remembers events differently than any one member alone. One person keeps the picture, another keeps the silence, another keeps the body tension, another keeps the practical rule. Do not talk about that. Do not trust strangers. Always be ready. Never need too much. Culture carries songs, laws, wounds, jokes, food, rituals, warnings, and habits that enter bodies before they are examined. A child can inherit a way of scanning the room without inheriting a mystical force. They inherit behavior, environment, emotional tone, economic conditions, and repeated meanings. Trauma can travel this way, not only through genes and not only through conscious stories, but through parenting under stress, family silence, unpredictable attachment, poverty, discrimination, displacement, and the body language of adults who learned danger early. Hope can travel too, through repair after conflict, through songs that make endurance speakable, through routines that show the future is worth planning for, through adults who apologize, through communities that make suffering less private. These transmissions are not invisible fields in the strong physical sense. They are patterns moving through behavior, bodies, symbols, and institutions. They can survive because they are repeated. They can change because repetition can be interrupted. A forest gives a useful image only if it is kept close to the mechanism. Trees in a forest are not isolated poles of wood. They shape light, moisture, soil, fungal networks, animal movement, and the conditions for seedlings. Some connections are direct, some are indirect, some are chemical, some are structural. The forest is not one mind, and it is not magic. It is a living system in which the condition of one part can alter the conditions around other parts. Human emotional life is not a forest, but it has a similar warning against over-isolation. A person's fear changes their body, their voice, their choices, their relationships, and the room their children grow up in. A person's steadiness can become a pattern other bodies learn from. A culture's language can make some feelings easy to name and others nearly invisible. A home can train vigilance or return. A school can teach curiosity or threat. These are pathways, not metaphors alone. At this scale, the question shifts from energy to information. Information here does not mean data on a computer. It means patterned difference that changes what a system does. A facial expression is information if another nervous system uses it to adjust. A diagnosis is information if the body's threat level changes after hearing it. A ritual is information if it organizes attention and expectation. A memory is information if it changes present prediction. A social rule is information if it changes posture before anyone speaks. Emotion is filled with information. It marks what matters to the organism. It signals need, danger, loss, attraction, violation, safety, uncertainty, or readiness. It is not always accurate. It can be old, distorted, intensified, muted, or misdirected. But it is rarely meaningless. Even a misleading emotion is usually doing something: protecting, predicting, conserving, mobilizing, reaching, hiding, or asking for repair. This is why emotional regulation is not simply silencing the signal. Silencing may be necessary in an emergency, but it is not the deepest form of regulation. The deeper task is to make the signal more accurate, to ask what it is carrying, to separate present danger from remembered danger, to separate hunger from despair, to separate shame from responsibility, to separate anger that protects a boundary from anger that repeats an old fight, to separate grief asking for presence from numbness asking for rest. The body enters decision-making before a choice feels purely rational. A slight tightening may mark one option as unsafe. A sense of opening may make another feel possible. A sensation of resistance may slow the hand before the mind explains why. These bodily markers do not always tell the truth, but they influence which futures feel reachable. Reason does not enter an empty room. It enters a body that has already tagged some paths as dangerous, familiar, tempting, shameful, or unbearable. A person deciding whether to speak honestly in a difficult conversation is not weighing words alone. The stomach may tighten, the throat may close, the chest may brace. Memory supplies previous costs. The other person's face supplies new signals. The body estimates whether honesty will lead to repair, punishment, abandonment, or relief. The eventual sentence may sound simple, but it emerges from an entire regulatory calculation. Relationships make the calculation even more layered. One person does not send only words. They send response time, eye movement, facial tension, interruption, distance, softness, impatience, and the length of silence after vulnerability. The other person does not receive only language. They receive an estimate of whether it is safe to continue, whether a mistake will be forgiven, whether pain will be held or used as evidence against them, whether anger means danger or only boundary. This is why the same sentence can heal in one relationship and wound in another. The words are the same, but the system receiving them is not. History changes the receiver, tone changes the receiver, timing changes the receiver. A phrase of reassurance spoken too quickly can sound like dismissal. A hard truth spoken with steadiness can feel safer than a soft lie spoken with avoidance. Meaning travels through the whole channel, not just the text. From this perspective, the body is not trying to solve one problem called emotion. It is trying to solve the problem of living among signals. Some signals come from tissue damage, some from hunger, some from memory, some from another person's face, some from culture, some from a lab result, some from a word, some from a silence. The nervous system must decide which signals matter, which can be ignored, which require action and which belong to a danger that is no longer present. It does this under uncertainty, with incomplete information, inside a body that has needs and limits. This is why emotion can feel so absolute while being biologically provisional. Fear says danger, shame says hide, anger says push back, grief says something precious is gone. But beneath those commands, the organism is making an inference. It may be accurate enough to save a life, it may be outdated enough to close a door that is actually open. The signal feels final because the body prepares action before the mind finishes debate. This physical urgency explains why unsupported explanations become attractive. If a feeling arrives with the force of heartbeat, breath, heat, and muscle tension, it seems too large to be only biology. It seems like it must be a field, a vibration, a cosmic message, or an invisible force. But biology is not small. A panic attack can make a safe room feel lethal. Grief can alter appetite, sleep, pain, and time. Love can reorganize priorities for years. Shame can change posture before thought. The body does not need to leave physics to become overwhelming. And still, the boundary remains open enough to be humbling. The self is not sealed in the skull. Emotion is not sealed in a word. Meaning is not sealed in a single brain. Bodies exchange signals constantly. Tools extend memory. Language extends thought. Culture extends emotional categories. Relationships extend regulation. Medicine works partly through molecules and partly through trust, explanation, expectation, and care. The human organism is individual but not isolated. That is the clean middle path, stronger than reductionism, safer than mysticism. Reductionism would say emotion is nothing but chemicals, as if the social world and meaning were illusions painted on top. Mysticism would say emotion is a subtle force that directly reshapes reality without showing how. The living system sits between them. Chemicals matter, signals matter, words matter, touch matters, memory matters, institutions matter. The path from one to another is not magic. It is mechanism layered inside mechanism. A diagnosis is sound waves until a brain understands the words, then it becomes prediction. Prediction changes the body's threat level. Threat changes sleep, pain, appetite, attention, and behavior. Behavior changes treatment, relationships, and recovery conditions. In that chain, meaning becomes physical without ever needing to violate physics. The transformation is not instant command. It is translation through systems. A parent's calm is not a force field. It is a pattern of voice, posture, touch, timing, and reliability. The child's body uses that pattern. Over years, repeated safety becomes expectation. Expectation becomes regulation. Regulation becomes personality, or at least part of what others later call personality. Again, meaning becomes biology through repetition, relationship, and the plasticity of the nervous system. A culture's fear is not a cloud floating above a city. It is news, law, rumour, policing, silence, unequal danger, economic pressure, inherited memory, and bodies that learn where they are allowed to relax. It lives in nervous systems because it lives in conditions. Change the conditions, and some of the body's predictions can begin to change. Leave the conditions untouched, and asking individuals to calm themselves becomes a smaller solution than the biology requires. Here the science becomes morally uncomfortable without becoming moralistic. If emotion is regulation, then environments regulate. If meaning becomes biology, then careless meanings can harm, and careful meanings can protect. If bodies learn through repeated signals, then societies participate in what their members' nervous systems come to expect. The claim is not that every illness is social, or every feeling is caused by culture. The claim is narrower and heavier. No body regulates in a vacuum. Even solitude is populated. A person alone in a room may be accompanied by remembered voices, cultural rules, old dangers, imagined judgments, saved messages, songs, prayers, diagnoses, debts, promises, and the posture learned from years of being watched or ignored. The brain can simulate social presence so strongly that the body responds as if someone else were there. A memory can raise the heart rate. An anticipated conversation can tighten the throat, A future event can disturb sleep before it exists. The body regulates not only the present environment, but the expected one. This may be the most precise way to answer where influence stops. It stops where no signal, receiver, pathway, memory, expectation, or material condition can carry it. But in human life, those carriers are everywhere, not as supernatural forces, as breath, speech, touch, tools, laws, stories, rooms, schedules, screens, medical rituals, family patterns, and repeated encounters. The influence stops less often than the isolated model imagines, but it travels through more ordinary channels than the mystical model claims. The ordinary channels are enough to make the problem vast. A single emotion can alter breathing. Breathing can alter bodily feedback. Bodily feedback can alter perception. Perception can alter behavior. Behavior can alter another person's body. Repeated behavior can alter a relationship. Repeated relationships can shape development. Development can tune stress systems. Stress systems can influence health. Health can influence mood. Mood can alter the next room a person enters. The chain is not linear, and it does not always move in one direction. It loops. Because it loops, small interventions sometimes matter more than their size suggests. One clear explanation, one trusted witness, one reliable routine, one repaired rupture, one place where the body learns that arousal can rise and fall without catastrophe. These do not erase biology. They add new delta to it. They give the nervous system something else to predict from. But because it loops, harm can also echo. One humiliation may become a memory. Repeated humiliation may become posture. Repeated posture may become expectation. Expectation may change which relationships feel possible. The body protects itself, and the protection can become a smaller life. To see this clearly is not to blame the body. It is to understand why safety cannot be only a slogan. Safety is information the organism must be able to verify. By now, the most dramatic claim has become unnecessary. Emotion does not need to be an invisible energy controlling the universe. It is already a pattern that can reorganize a living body, shape perception, move between people, alter pain, influence stress biology, enter decisions, and become part of collective life through repeated signals. The narrow truth is more demanding than the grand claim, because it does not let us escape into metaphor. It asks what our bodies are actually doing to one another. That question is quieter than the language of hidden forces, but it is not less intense. It means that a voice can become physiology, a room can become prediction, a relationship can become regulation, an account can become a body's readiness for danger or repair. A culture can become a pattern of breath held across generations, not because meaning floats outside matter, but because living matter is built to use meaning. The body knows first, but it does not always know clearly. It receives signals from tissue, memory, people, and place. It turns them into readiness. It gives that readiness a feeling. It sends the feeling outward through posture, voice, timing, and choice. Another body receives some part of it and begins its own translation. If emotion is not a force that escapes biology, but information moving through biology, then the final question becomes more practical and more difficult. How do we learn to read the signal without becoming trapped by it? To read an emotion without becoming trapped by it, the body first has to be treated as a source of information, not as an enemy to defeat. That sounds simple until the signal arrives with force. Fear does not usually knock gently. Shame does not present itself as a neutral report. Anger does not wait patiently while the mind checks its sources. The body prepares action, and only afterward does consciousness try to interpret the preparation. By the time a feeling has a name, heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, attention, memory and expectation may already be organized around it. This is why the first act of regulation is often not control but orientation. The body needs to know where it is. The mind needs to notice what has changed. The breath is shallow, the stomach is tight, the jaw is held, The eyes are scanning. The shoulders are lifted. The thought may be saying one thing, but the organism is saying something more physical. Prepare, hide, push back, hold still, reach, withdraw, endure. If the feeling is treated as pure truth, it can take over the whole field of perception. If it is treated as meaningless noise, the body may become louder. The cleaner path is harder. The feeling must be taken seriously without being obeyed automatically. A body signal is evidence, it is not a verdict. That distinction gives emotion a different role. Fear may be evidence that the nervous system has detected uncertainty, speed, memory, or threat. It does not prove that danger is present in the exact form imagined. Anger may be evidence that a boundary, need, or injury has been touched. It does not prove that the first impulse is wise. Shame may be evidence that social belonging feels threatened. It does not prove that the self is defective. Sadness may be evidence of loss, exhaustion, or the need to slow. It does not prove that the future is closed. The body speaks in urgency because urgency is useful for survival. But urgency is not the same as accuracy. The brain's predictive machinery makes this both risky and hopeful. If the brain expects danger, it can interpret ambiguous signals as confirming danger. A neutral face becomes cold. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A tight chest becomes proof that something is wrong. Once the prediction takes hold, the body begins to help build the world the prediction expects. Breathing changes, attention narrows, memory retrieves supporting evidence. The feeling becomes stronger because the system is feeding itself. But the same loop can be interrupted, not by denying the feeling, but by changing the evidence available to the organism. A slower exhale gives the brain different bodily data. A clear name reduces ambiguity. A trusted person changes the social field. A lamp turned on in a dark room changes visual uncertainty. A glass of water, a meal, a walk, a medical explanation, or a pause before replying can all alter the system's inputs. None of these is magical. They are small changes in the conditions from which emotion is constructed. The body does not need a perfect argument. It needs enough new information to update. Sometimes that information begins with language. The difference between I am in danger and my body is remembering danger can be biologically meaningful. The sentence does not erase arousal, but it changes the model. It gives the prefrontal regions something more precise to hold. It lets the person remain close to the sensation without becoming identical with it. A racing heart becomes a racing heart, not necessarily a prophecy. A tight throat becomes a tight throat, not necessarily proof that speaking is impossible. Precision softens the grip of the vague. A person who says I feel bad has only a dark room. A person who says I feel exposed, I feel abandoned, I feel cornered, or I feel overstimulated has begun to find furniture in that room. The feeling may still hurt, but it has shape. Shape makes response possible. This is why emotional granularity matters. People who can distinguish more precisely among feelings often have more options for regulation. Irritation is not the same as grief. Loneliness is not the same as failure. Anxiety is not the same as intuition. Exhaustion is not the same as hopelessness. When the label becomes more accurate, the intervention can become more humane. Hunger needs food. Grief needs presence. Panic needs grounding and safety. Guilt may need repair. Shame may need contact without humiliation. The body often suffers when the wrong problem is being solved. Someone may try to reason their way out of exhaustion when the body needs sleep. Someone may try to breathe through a situation that actually requires a boundary. Someone may call anger unhealthy when it is carrying information about repeated violation. Someone may call fear irrational when the environment is still unpredictable. Regulation does not always mean lowering arousal. Sometimes it means using arousal correctly. A body that rises to protect itself is not broken. A problem appears when the rise has no path, no interpretation, no return, or no connection to the present. The question then is not how to become calm in every moment. A body that never reacts would not be wise. It would be numb or unsafe. The question is how to let emotion complete its biological job without allowing outdated predictions to govern the whole life. That job can be very different depending on the emotion. Fear sharpens detection and prepares protection. Anger mobilizes energy toward a blocked boundary or injustice. Disgust creates distance from contamination or violation. Sadness slows the organism around loss, sometimes drawing support from others. Joy opens approach, play, exploration, and bonding. Tenderness changes the body's relationship to vulnerability, or can widen attention and reduce the dominance of immediate self-concern. These are broad patterns, not fixed formulas, but each emotion carries a possible action tendency. The trouble begins when action tendencies become automatic identity. My body is preparing to defend becomes I am an angry person. My body is preparing to hide becomes I am weak. My nervous system is scanning for threat becomes the world is unsafe. The body's temporary state hardens into an account about the self and reality. Once that happens, regulation has to work on two levels at once: the physical state and the meaning built around it. Meaning can be changed, but not by force alone. The nervous system is suspicious of sudden declarations that contradict its evidence. A person who says I am safe, while the body still reads the room as dangerous, may feel worse, because the mismatch becomes obvious. A more accurate sentence may work better. My body is on alert. I do not yet know whether this is present danger or old learning. I can slow down enough to check. That kind of sentence does not pretend. It gives the organism a bridge between arousal and investigation. The bridge matters because many emotional signals are mixtures. A person can be angry and ashamed at once, grieving and relieved, afraid and excited, lonely and protective, tender and defensive. The body is not required to send one clean message at a time. It can prepare several possible actions, especially in complex social situations. Consciousness often wants a single label because single labels are easier to manage. Biology is less tidy. A difficult conversation may contain fear of losing connection, anger about being misunderstood, shame about needing too much, hope for repair, and fatigue from previous attempts. If only one layer is named, the response may miss the whole pattern. The anger may be loudest, but fear may be organizing it. The shame may be deepest, but exhaustion may be amplifying it. The body is not lying. It is compressing many signals into one pressure. To read the signal well, the mind has to slow the compression. Attention becomes a biological tool here. Attention can amplify a sensation, soften it, locate it, or place it in context. Focus too tightly on a heartbeat during anxiety, and each beat may become more alarming. Ignore the body entirely, and the signal may escalate until it interrupts. A steadier attention notices the sensation without turning it into a catastrophe. It asks where the feeling is, how it changes with breathing, whether it has edges, whether it grows when a thought appears, whether it eases when the room becomes safer. This kind of noticing is not passive, it changes the loop. When a person observes a sensation with less threat, the brain receives not only the sensation, but the context of observing it without immediate escape. Over time, that can become new evidence. The body learns that a racing heart can be tolerated, that a memory can rise and pass, that a difficult feeling does not always require collapse or attack. Regulation becomes a learned relationship with arousal. The learning is physical. It may show up as a shorter recovery after stress, a less catastrophic interpretation of discomfort, a greater ability to stay present during conflict, or a slower movement from trigger to action. These changes are not always visible from outside. They may appear first as a half-second of space where there used to be none, a breath before answering, a recognition before withdrawal, a hand unclenching, a jaw releasing, a sentence chosen instead of an impulse. A half-second can be a large biological event. In that half-second, prediction can be interrupted. The prefrontal cortex can influence action. The body can receive a different command than the old one. The social field can change because one person does not repeat the expected pattern. A conversation that would have escalated may bend. A child watching may learn that anger does not always become danger. A nervous system may record quietly that arousal can move through and not destroy the relationship. This is how change often enters the system, not as one great transformation, but as many small updates that become credible because they are repeated. Repetition is the language the nervous system trusts. One calm breath may help for a moment. Repeated practice can make the pathway easier to find. One safe conversation may surprise the body. Repeated repair can make safety more believable. One night of sleep can improve regulation. Repeated rest can change the baseline from which the world is interpreted. One act of naming can reduce confusion. Repeated precision can build a richer emotional map. The body's always learning, even when we wish it would learn faster. This is why regulation practices work best when they are not treated as performances. Breathing slowly in order to prove control can become another stressor. Naming feelings in order to win an argument can become another defense. Meditation used to silence pain can become avoidance. Movement used to punish the body can increase threat. The same tool can regulate or dysregulate depending on meaning, intensity, timing, and context. A slow breath helps most when it's not an order barked at the body, but a signal offered to it. A hand on the chest helps if it feels supportive, not forced. Movement helps if it restores agency, not if it becomes another demand. Rest helps if the environment permits enough safety for the body to release vigilance. Even techniques have relationships built into them. The relationship between attention and sensation, between intention and pressure, between the person and the body being addressed. The body can tell the difference between care and command. That difference becomes especially important in trauma. A trauma response is not simply a strong memory, it's a learned pattern of survival that may involve sensory fragments, autonomic shifts, defensive reflexes, changes in attention, and altered expectations about safety. The body may respond before the person knows what triggered it. A smell, a tone, a posture, a time of day, a closed door, or a facial expression can become enough to activate an old model. The present moment is filtered through a past condition that once mattered. Telling such a body to calm down is often ineffective because the body is not making a philosophical mistake. It is performing a protection sequence. The path toward change usually requires enough safety to let the sequence complete differently. That may involve therapy, medical support, stable relationships, movement, grounding, careful exposure, community, and time. The point is not to convince the body that nothing happened. The point is to help it learn that the old danger is not the only future available. The distinction is quiet, but it protects dignity. The nervous system does not cling to old alarms because it is foolish. It repeats them because repetition once served survival. Even when the pattern has become painful, it carries a history of protection. To change it, the organism needs more than criticism. It needs new conditions strong enough, repeated enough, and safe enough to become evidence. This is also why co-regulation remains central. Many emotional states become more workable when they are held in the presence of another regulated nervous system. Not because another person fixes the biology from outside, but because the body receives signals it cannot produce alone in the same way. A face that stays kind during distress, a voice that does not rush, a silence that does not punish, a boundary that does not humiliate, a repair after rupture. These are not luxuries added to regulation. They are part of how social mammals learn what arousal means. The nervous system is built not only to survive danger, but to detect safety. Safety is often misunderstood as the absence of difficulty. But a safe relationship is not one where nothing painful is ever said. It is one where pain does not immediately become abandonment, attack, or disappearance. A safe body is not a body that never trembles. It is a body that can tremble and still return. A safe room is not one without conflict. It is one where signals are clear enough that the organism does not have to solve every silence as a threat. Clear signals reduce biological cost. Predictable information lets the brain spend less energy guessing. When a doctor explains what a sensation means, uncertainty may drop. When a partner says they need time but will return, the body has a different prediction than if they simply vanish. When a parent repairs after anger, the child learns that rupture is not always permanent. The body learns through the shape of what happens after arousal. Repair may be one of the most important rhythms in emotional biology. No nervous system remains perfectly regulated. People misread, react, withdraw, snap, freeze, overwhelm, or miss each other. If the goal is perfect calm, then every rupture becomes failure. If the goal is repair, then the system has a path back. Repair teaches the body that disturbance does not have to become exile. It gives emotion a complete arc: activation, recognition, response, return. Without return, the organism may begin living in unfinished states. Anger without repair becomes bitterness or vigilance. Fear without safety becomes chronic scanning. Grief without presence becomes isolation. Shame without reconnection becomes hiding. The feeling cannot complete its regulatory movement, so it remains in the body as readiness, tension, or expectation. Return is not decorative. It is part of the physiological cycle. This is why rituals matter in ordinary life. A morning routine, a shared meal, a walk after conflict, a predictable bedtime, a familiar song, a careful goodbye, a weekly conversation. These may seem small compared with the intensity of emotion, but repetition gives the nervous system landmarks. It says the day has a shape. People leave and return. Hunger is answered. Darkness is followed by rest. Conflict can be followed by speech. The body uses pattern to reduce uncertainty. Rituals become harmful when they trap the body in fear or control. They become helpful when they create reliable pathways back to orientation. The difference is not only what the ritual looks like from outside, it is what information the organism receives through it. Does this pattern widen life or shrink it? Does it reduce threat or intensify monitoring? Does it allow flexibility or punish deviation? A regulated body is not one bound by rigid repetition. It is one supported by enough rhythm to tolerate change. At a larger scale, communities also regulate through rhythm. Public spaces, laws, schedules, customs, healthcare, schools, work demands, and economic stability all send signals to bodies. A society that makes rest impossible cannot solve stress only by teaching breathing exercises. A workplace that rewards constant urgency cannot be surprised when bodies lose the ability to settle. A school that treats every mistake as danger trains a different nervous system than one that treats mistakes as information. Biology responds to conditions, not slogans. This does not remove personal agency. It places agency inside reality. A person can learn practices, seek help, change habits, name emotions more accurately, protect boundaries, and repair relationships. But the success of those efforts is shaped by sleep, safety, money, time, health, discrimination, caregiving load, and the social environment around them. A nervous system is personal, but the pressures upon it are often shared. The body knows the difference between advice and support. Advice may be correct and still fail if the organism lacks the conditions to use it. Rest more means little to someone whose survival depends on overwork. Calm down means little in a threatening home. Think positive may become a burden when pain needs treatment. Support changes the environment in which regulation happens. It may provide time, protection, explanation, food, medicine, witness, money, childcare, or simply a relationship where the body is not punished for having a body. A scientifically clean understanding of emotion therefore becomes more compassionate, not less. It removes the fantasy that people should be able to command themselves into balance at any moment. It also removes the fantasy that emotions are untouchable storms with no possible intervention. The middle is more demanding. Emotions are embodied patterns that can be influenced, but they must be influenced through real pathways: physiology, attention, interpretation, relationship, environment, and time. The same principle applies to the strongest claims about emotional influence. It is tempting to believe that because feelings are powerful, they must reach beyond the body in unlimited ways. But power inside experience is not the same as force in physics. A feeling can dominate perception and still have no direct effect on a distant object. A belief can change pain and still not rewrite external matter. A group's mood can alter decisions and still not prove a mysterious field. The clean boundary does not diminish emotion. It keeps us from asking it to do what it has not been shown to do. What emotion has been shown to do is already immense. It can organize the body for action. It can change breathing and heart timing. It can alter attention and memory. It can influence pain, expectation, and stress physiology. It can move through voice, face, posture, touch, rhythm, and culture. It can become part of long-term patterns when repeated. It can mislead, protect, narrow, open, exhaust, restore, and connect. The fact that emotion is not magic does not make it small. It makes it accountable to mechanism. That accountability matters because the language around emotion can heal or harm. If someone says, "Your thoughts created your illness," the claim may sound empowering, but it places an unbearable burden on a suffering body. If someone says, "Your emotions are just chemicals," the claim may sound scientific, but it strips away meaning, relationship, and context. The more accurate language is less convenient. Emotions are biological and meaningful. They are shaped by chemistry and interpretation. They are personal and social. They can affect health without controlling fate. In that accuracy, there is relief. A person does not have to believe every feeling in order to respect it. They do not have to obey every impulse in order to hear the need beneath it. They do not have to prove total control in order to change. They do not have to turn pain into a cosmic message in order for it to matter. The body's signal is enough to deserve attention. Reading the signal begins with humility. The mind admits that the body may have noticed something early. The body admits, through practice and new experience, that not every alarm belongs to the present. Neither side wins by silencing the other. The organism becomes wiser when signal and interpretation can meet. There are moments when this meeting is almost invisible. Someone feels anger rise and notices the heat before speaking. Someone feels panic and lengthens the exhale, not to erase fear, but to keep enough room to see. Someone feels shame and reaches toward a trusted person instead of disappearing. Someone hears bad news and lets the body tremble without building a permanent account around the trembling. Someone apologizes before the old defense becomes a wall. These moments may not look dramatic from outside, but inside the nervous system they are acts of reorganization. The measurement may be small, a slower return of the breath, a less rigid jaw, a heart rhythm that finds more flexibility after strain, a night of sleep after a hard conversation, a child who does not hide after making a mistake. These are not proofs of perfect healing. They are signs that the organism has found another path through arousal. The body does not become untouched by life. It becomes less alone inside its reactions. Over time, the question becomes gentler but not weaker. At the beginning, the strange fact was that the body changes before the mind can explain why. A heartbeat shifts, a breath catches, muscles prepare. The ordinary account of emotion as a private thought begins to fail. Then the picture widened. The brain builds feeling from bodily signals, memory, context, and prediction. The heart and breath help organize perception. Other people's voices and faces become part of regulation. Meaning can enter pain, stress, immune communication, and behavior. Culture and relationship can carry emotional patterns farther than one body. But the boundary stayed clear. Emotion does not need to be treated as a hidden force escaping physics. The evidence does not require that. It points to something more grounded and more intimate, a living organism in constant exchange with itself and its surroundings. The body receives signals, predicts what they mean, prepares action, and then sends new signals into the world. What feels private is already partly relational. What feels mental is already bodily. What feels bodily is already shaped by meaning. A human being is not a mind riding inside a machine, nor is a human being only a machine with thoughts painted on top. We are regulatory systems that feel our own adjustments from the inside. We are bodies that turn danger, safety, memory, loss, hunger, touch, voice, and hope into patterns of readiness. We are nervous systems that can be wrong and still be trying to protect us. We are social organisms whose signals can injure, steady, confuse, or restore one another. Scientific humility here is not cold. It is the discipline of not making the body less interesting by exaggerating it. The known mechanisms are already deep enough to change how a room is entered, how a child is held, how pain is explained, how conflict is repaired, and how a person listens to the first tightening in the chest before it becomes a life account. In the end, the body knowing first does not mean the body always knows best. It means the first message often arrives below language, in rhythm, pressure, heat, breath, and motion. Our task is not to worship that message or to silence it. It is to receive it carefully, compare it with the present, and answer it with enough truth, safety, and patience that the organism can update. The mystery softens there, not into certainty and not into magic, but into a quieter understanding that every emotion is a living negotiation between what has happened, what is happening, and what the body believes may happen next.